Sherry Barnes with Building Managers International, and today we're here to talk a little bit about preparing for hurricane season. And to help me out with this, Kip Kollmeyer of Mitchell Insurance Services. Hi, Kip. How are you doing?
Hey.
Kip is a specialist in community association insurance. So, Kip, let's just start really quickly. We're going to break this down into a couple of segments and sections. We want to talk about hurricane deductibles because a lot of community associations are not familiar with how they may think they know what their deductible is going to do when a hurricane comes or when they have a storm or just any kind of property damage. But I think there is some confusion into how the hurricane deductible is triggered and what type of, there's various types of deductibles, correct?
Absolutely. So the big thing with hurricane deductibles, obviously your first dollar exposure is your big dollar item. You know, it's the biggest expense probably that you're going to face as a community association. And so when we look at hurricane deductibles, you generally have a couple of options. Most carriers are providing named storm deductibles or hurricane deductibles. And then they're providing a percentage deductible based on your building's insurable value. And they're either doing that for calendar year or for per occurrence. So there's a lot of stipulations that kind of happen with hurricane, and it can be confusing. So if you're not up to speed on what's occurring in your policy language, that's what we want to kind of clarify for you today. You know, 2020 was a very busy hurricane season. Fortunately, I think in our immediate area here in the Tampa Bay area, we weren't affected too drastically. We had that November tropical storm that sort of came through and gave us a run for our money right at the end of the season. 2021's projections are similar to what 2020's was, but the difference is 2020, we had like the most active hurricane season on record. 12 named hurricanes made landfall in the United States. I think that's the most in any hurricane season. We had 31 or 30 named storms. So talking a lot of devastation in the southeastern United States, where we typically think of the Gulf of Mexico states that take the brunt of the impact, right? So you had 12 hurricanes make landfall in the United States. We had $26 billion, as of right now at least, in insurable losses that were affected last year in 2020. Crazy storm year, right? So we're obviously, they're always hopeful in Florida that we dodge bullets, especially on the West Coast here in Pinellas, Hillsborough, Pasco, our surrounding area. It's projected to be another active season, and we will just kind of see. We always pray that it's a slow year, and especially with insurance. And you know, the insurance rates have really been affected from 2016 all the way through 2020. That's what's really been a big driver in your insurance rates. Whether you had claims or not, you're still feeling the effects of the past 4 or 5 years. It's kind of crazy.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how they would understand. How do you know if you have a calendar year deductible versus just a term deductible?
Yeah, so the big thing with understanding your deductibles is how to read your policy language, or having an agent that can explain it to you as best possible. And with your deductibles, you got a couple of things to look at. I mentioned named storm versus hurricane, and I mentioned per occurrence versus calendar year. So a named storm, when we think about the hurricane deductible that we're facing, a named storm can be, as soon as it's triggered with a name, it goes from tropical depression to tropical storm. Now we have a name, and if it makes landfall, or if there's damage to your property because of that named storm, that will trigger a named storm deductible. The difference between that and a hurricane deductible is that a hurricane deductible will trigger when it is category 1 through 5. If it has been category 1 through 5 and it's downgraded before landfall down to tropical storm, and it's no longer a category 1 through 5, you would either switch to an all other perils deductible, or if you have all other wind, that can kind of get in there into play as well. But that's the biggest difference between named storm and hurricane, category 1 through 5, or just having a name. Second, we look at, is it per occurrence or is it per calendar year? And your policy documents will say that clear as day. It will say the percentage of what the deductible is, and it will say either CY, HD, or something similar, but it'll say calendar year or CY. And what we typically see is a 2%, 3%, or 5%, and that's based on the building's value. When I mean that, if you have a 3% hurricane deductible, it's a pretty common number, and you have $1 million building, your hurricane deductible for $1 million building is $30,000 out the pocket when we have a loss. So your percentage is based on the building value, not on the amount of the loss or the estimated loss. So that hopefully will clarify for some board members, unit owners, on what that percentage means.
So if a condominium association has multiple buildings that are hit by a hurricane, how is that deductible going to play out? Is it going to be per building? Is it going to be one, max deductible? How does that work?
Yeah, if you are a condo association with multiple buildings, each building is scheduled on your policy, and its insurable replacement cost value is scheduled. So your hurricane deductible is going to be for each building that is scheduled. So if you have $1 million building and a $500,000 building and another $1 million building, you got 3 separate deductibles, 30,000, 15,000, 30,000, looking at what's 60 plus 15 is $85,000 out of pocket to at least sustain that amount of damage for your policy then to trigger coverage.
As a condo board member, you should be aware of, number one, how many buildings is this deductible going to be applied to? So a good agent would give you a proposal that says, these are your deductibles, and this per build, here's the list of the buildings, here's the deductible by building. Kind of explain to me a little bit about what they should look for. Like, what should they be getting from their agent that's going to help them kind of be able to access this really quickly and go to their agent and say, if we don't have a reserve for this deductible, what are our options?
Yeah, so because the insurance market has gotten very tight and very tough in the state of Florida, what you're seeing is a lot of carriers are restricting the options that they're providing. If you're an association that has a 2% hurricane deductible and your renewal comes back, let's say 25% over last year, you may be looking at other options for your deductible percentage, 3% or 5%. But the biggest impact is looking at what's your first dollar out of pocket expense going to be. You change from a 2% to a 3% deductible. Well, if you have a small TIV, a small total insurable value on your building, that impact might not be so severe. But right. 2 to 3% on a $1 million insurable value on the building, I'm talking 10 grand. So That's a lot. That's a lot for associations to plan and prepare for. So if you don't have a reserve account for hurricane deductibles or for claims or anything like that, what you need to look at is getting a relationship in place with a financial institution that can put together a line of credit for the association and the need for that. Because first and foremost, you want to get everything back to where it was before your loss. And so if you don't have the funds to immediately take that from your own accounts, you got to have something set up as a safety net.